Good
This
evening and
meeting
welcome to
is being
Slam the
recorded.
Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code SLAMTHEGAVEL for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And Urgent Assist is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away 5 months ago. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul, New York State, 518-474-8390, to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a brand new guest on. I have Laurie from Phoenix, Arizona, and she's going to talk about her mother. On December 5th, 2015, her mother had a major medical event at her home, which Laurie witnessed. Laurie gave her CPR while speaking to 911. The fire department responded, and her mother was sent to the hospital. Due to her observing what happened, the mother was placed into hypothermia protocol and placed into a medically induced coma. Despite most physicians not believing she would survive, she came out of the coma 10 days later alive, but with major brain damage. She lived in 3 skilled 24/7 rehabs until April 12, 2016, when she was removed against medical advice by 3 of the 8 children. None of them had medical power of attorney. And we're going to talk about, what Laurie has gone through and the events of the removal from the facility and the attorneys and the good faith complaints made to Adult Protective Services. I welcome you, Laurie. I'm so sorry you have gone through this. Where are you at with your case now?
Well, thank you very much for having me and using your platform to be a voice for the voiceless. And just in researching after what happened to my mom, I've come in contact with people who have experienced the same thing in Maricopa County Superior Court Probate Division. And where we are in our case right now is that my sister, this has gone on for quite some time, the questionable trustee filed a petition in 2021 in June. And the rules had changed somewhat in probate court, and they don't seem to track or flag, or this was a newly appointed commissioner who had taken the case. And a commissioner in Arizona, what that means versus a judge is vetted and appointed by the governor. In this case, a commissioner is appointed from the judge in the court, so this would be probate court, from attorneys who have applied for the commissioner position. Commissioners are only supposed to do basic rubber stamping and uncontested cases. This was a contested case. She never should have been on it. She made appellate mistakes. And this one filing cost my mother. This was only a petition placed in probate court to protect the trustee from legal ramifications. And it cost my mother over $150,000. We had done our own work. In the beginning, we asked for a guardian ad litem. You are given a notice that says you have to appear or have to file at the hearing, which the hearing was only 15 minutes long for this 600-page filing. It was almost 30 pages of a pleading, and the rest was 600 pages of ridiculous exhibits intended to force 3 of us who didn't agree with the other 5 in the family. We wanted to support our mother in her recovery and her health. The other 5 just wanted to follow a Pied Piper in the family who didn't have any power. And so that's what happened. We responded. We had to within 15, we only had 15 minutes in the hearing, and we had to respond. So we responded with our own response to their narratives and their pleading, with our own evidence. And we also asked for a guardian ad litem to be able, so that my mother had an attorney working for her. The questionable trustee had an attorney working for her who was acting not essentially like a trust attorney, but also as a pseudo defense attorney, because the entire pleading was to allow the trustee to escape legal ramifications and time barring on certain things they have done.
Oh, this is terrible.
So we're at, no, thank you. So it went on to a trial track. My other sibling and I tried to intervene and get it to slow down. We contacted the judge along with the other attorney for the things she had ordered because they were not complying with the dates, which was slowing down discovery. We did not have an attorney. This commissioner didn't appear to appreciate people who didn't have attorneys and would continually say, you feel free to have an attorney, but attorneys aren't free. You're expected to know all the updates to Arizona Civil Rules of Procedure, and including those specific to probate law, which of course, in my opinion, there should be crime scene tape and warning tape across Maricopa County Superior Court so that you are aware of what can happen to you. A big problem is if you haven't worked in probate court before or haven't been in it, you've seen criminal court and civil court possibly and see how they run. The courts of equity, which are family court and which are probate court, do not run by the same laws. The judges commissioners can do whatever they want. And it relates back to I couldn't understand it, relates back to the 1788 U.S. Code on probate court, which back then probate matters were wills and were left to the states to regulate. So that's where we are. We went through the trial. It lasted, as I said, it cost my mom over $150,000. My brother was forced to pay an attorney. It ended up being $50,000 for the attorney. 3 weeks before we went to trial, we realized we would get swamped because the trustee had two attorneys working for her, a very large law firm, and they were all sucking up my mother's very modest estate. So 3 weeks before, we had to get an attorney to be able to go through the trial, and my brother paid that. And after the judgment came down. The trial was the end of April. The judgment came down July 11th. And the judgment said no one gets attorney's fees. And that my mother's records, there was a protective order on my mother's medical records, which I completely understand that. The public is not served by looking at my mother's medical records. That was it. From there, I was counting down the 30 days for appeal to appellate court to see if they would appeal. There's also a 15-day rule in Maricopa County Court. He did not, the opposing attorney did not follow that, the trustee's attorney. He waited until after that expired. Then he fired off a filing to the judge, a motion that either she didn't recall that she had assigned attorney's fees, which there was no record of it, to stick my brother and I with attorney's fees to pay his law firm back, or the clerk that she had in her court had made a mistake. So this has gone all the way from August all the way through to December 30th, when commissioner signed a judgment against my brother and I for some of the outrageous attorney's fees that the trustee's attorney had taken from my mother, which included the black billing, double, triple attorneys, also include billing where they had ex parte communication with the judicial assistant, things that are a big no-no. And we had tried, as I said, to get things that she had ordered were not coming forth, and it was taking time and it was breaking the schedule of the trial. We had tried to get her involved, and me asking about mediation. As a little side, I used to work in probate courts for a private probate attorney from 2007 to 2008.
Mhm.
I saw the awful things that went on there, that were going on with some of the fiduciaries and taking money. And I'll give you one example. One was they were charging $75 for delivery of a piece of junk mail. They were the conservators and they were paying the bills, so they were keeping those, and they would charge, for that. I mean, we're talking tens and tens and tens of thousands in 3 to 5 months, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. There was a scandal, I guess you could say. Cheryl Atkinson reported on it from CBS, Channel 15 here, Laurie Roberts from the Arizona Republic. So it became public, and I thought things were going to get better. So I've had nothing to do with probate court until that time, from 2008 onward to 2021, when this came out of left field and was filed by the trustee. So that's where we are. Our appeal time, because of how this has taken, we lost any chance we had of appealing had we known she was going to stick us with attorney's fees, where she had written in the judgment in July twice, bolded, no attorney's fees. We tried to settle the case because it was so stressful. We asked the opposing counsel if everybody just walk away. Everybody just walk away before trial, because he said in February, he sent us a letter. We still don't have an attorney yet. That he had already spent $80,000 of my mom's money for this, and it was going to be at least $50,000 plus for the trial in 2 months, which it was about $150,000. As I said, he works for a large law firm, and there were 2 attorneys on this case, and this is not a case where you would put 2 attorneys on it. And so my sibling and I were working as our own attorneys, which is a lot of work, going through disclosure and discovery and all that. And then to be punitive, the judge, even though she was rotated out, the commissioner, was rotated out, which Arizona does after a year. When you're a commissioner, they rotate you to another division. She just last month, I found out yesterday, was appointed to judge by a judge position by Governor Katie Hobbs. And I had no idea, because I would have complained a lot, because she made major mistakes, appellate mistakes in our case. She signed an order. I'll give you one example on that. She signed an order a day before, which the day after was our date that we had to have our appeal in her box in appealed appellate court. But which we were going to, which we couldn't, because she had already signed the order. And it's very punitive in retribution. And she finally ruled, I think it was in October, oh yes, I did forget to assign attorney's fees. And then she said, if I were to assign attorney's fees, it would have only been to the other sibling for one small minor thing. Then the opposing attorney, stuck in an order that he'd been trying to get in for all of his attorney's fees for the past year.
Mhm.
So it was outrageous, and our attorney filed. It was very good, and filed, but it's like I said, it's punitive. So he submitted a bill for $33,000 of the 150, and which were all questionable anyway, and did not include, it was supposed to just only be one area of privilege. And he stuck it in for our areas of confidential complaints to Adult Protective Services and our confidential complaint to the doctor's board.
Hmm.
And I was surprised. I will say this, I'm getting sideways a little bit here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
The first hearing, as I said, it was 15 minutes. So after the time the attorney spoke for the trustee, and everyone in my family was sworn in over the phone in Zoom, there was no time left to do anything. So it's a good thing that we had filed. He had with him my mother's quote, which my mother obviously couldn't have gotten an attorney when she was in the rehab place. She wasn't competent. And he said they would only agree to guardian ad litem if he was the guardian ad litem, which he had called me the night before, first time I'd heard from him. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm objecting to you as guardian ad litem because you're the one that started all this.
Right.
But
Right. Oh my
I found
goodness.
I found for the first time in the other attorney's objection to a guardian ad litem that there were confidential Adult Protective Service documents filed, which is not even what they're supposed to be used for. But the fact that he got them, we did not know until we got unredacted documents and the whole file was included last year, that this attorney had interfered with the state's Adult Protective Services investigation. The day after they went to see my mother, he wrote a letter to the investigator and told the investigator what he thought of he and I. And he knew that, I'm talking about the other sibling, and he knew that he and I had filed a confidential report. And he falsely stated to the investigator that the other sibling was getting a financial benefit from the trust, which was not true and was ridiculous because the piece of property that he was supposedly going to benefit from, the trustee, one of my sisters, had already sold all the property that my mother owned. And trusts are supposed to be for the benefit of the original trustor. They're supposed to make prudent financial decisions, which she did not. And we just found out in the middle of last month, the last remaining property, which was a rental property, they just up and sold off. They actually put it for listing December 31st, and we didn't know it. We thought it was still being rented to give my mom an extra little bit of income in addition to Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, she was bleeding $70,000 a year, which with a modest estate is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And her care costs for a year are probably about $130,000. So her state, we just found out 3 weeks ago, she's been placed in a care home. No phone. The only way we can talk to her is to drive down and see her. She's been removed from my sister's house and is now in a care facility. So that's where we are at. And if anyone, the mandatory reporters at the place she was out when she was signed out against medical advice by those that were not in charge. With my interaction with my mother, and what the facility had told my brother, who was a medical power of attorney, about her competency, that she was not competent. And in order to be, and this was all done by a lawyer supposedly retained by my mom. And what's funny is about it, lawyers do not do anything unless you give them money. And my mom, since my brother was in charge, he was co-trustee also, so he had access to my mom's financial. This attorney was never paid. He was paid by somebody else, because a month later, he charged my mother, and obviously must have given a refund to whichever one of the three sisters had driven her out. But competency, you're supposed to understand if you want to change your trust. You're supposed to understand what's in your trust, who's in your trust, what would be affected by your trust. You're supposed to have be able to communicate, whether it be verbal, whether it be written, in case you have an issue with that. And you're supposed to understand what it is you're doing. On the exact day that my mother had her paperwork changed in the attorney's office, hours before, she had gone through a 6-hour evaluation at a neuro rehab facility. My mother did not have competency, but apparently in Arizona, a lawyer can be a doctor and determine competency, and a doctor cannot be a lawyer. And it's given more weight in the judicial system than being a medical facility. And my mother was taken out against medical advice. Before that, she was taken out, and my brother, who's a medical power of attorney, should have approved it, and no one knew that they were going to take her to a doctor and have a doctor sign a piece of paper that she could manage her trust and anybody else's trust in all of her medical decisions, which that was clearly untrue. She was getting the medicine. She wasn't even taking it. She didn't know what was wrong with her. I'm talking about my interactions, because I saw her, and another sibling saw her every day. She was still having hallucinations. She didn't even know who she was. She didn't know that she had property.
Was she able to speak or no?
She was able to speak when another sibling and I would ask her questions. Two of the other siblings that didn't seem to care about how my mother was, and just their little con game of taking her out, which were Arizona felonies, reckless abuse against a vulnerable adult. And so it essentially was kidnapping. And she went straight to my sister's house, and we only went there. The last time I've been there was in October 1st of 2016. And my mother's brother had come into the house, had come into town from Hawaii to find out what was going on with his sister, because they wouldn't tell us anything. We're not allowed to see any medical records. The only thing we do get is a sloppy accounting that doesn't even conform to Maricopa County Superior Court standards. We get thousands of read-only pages that are just receipts. And we had to find out from the first accounting that they had bought a burial plot for my mom. That's kind of, not a good thing to find out. So we still don't know what's wrong with her. I don't know if she's quote, a hospice patient or not. She doesn't remember me or any of my kids. That started, a month after she was taken out, she went on a precipitous decline and was no longer improving. Precipitous decline. And that's because my mother, when she left without medical advice, that means she leaves without medicine. And she was on a lot of medicine because of what had happened to her. And she was also a fall risk. She was just starting to move. And she was taken to my sister's house, which no one in the family had any sort of medical training or is a medical practitioner.
Mm.
So she might have had another event, which is common after you have within a year of you having the first one,
Right.
because she was not the same. Within 3 weeks, she was ruined.
Oh. And that's from being at the sister's house.
Yes. And from probably not getting the medicine because she didn't leave with medicine. The
Mhm.
doctors, from what the staff told my brother, no doctor had contacted them to ask for my mom's records or contacted them to say that they had read them. As I said, apparently a lawyer's view of capacity, which is usually the 4 orientations to time, person, place, and situation. They call it O times whatever. And that can have various classes in that amongst itself. You can have a high class where someone might ask me, who are you on a Zoom with? And I could say her, or I could say Marianne Petrie, who has a podcast. Now that shows a lot higher level of critical thinking than just saying her.
Right.
My mom, visually and everything, like I said, before and after this doctor signed this paper, my mom was still living for 10 days or so in the facility she was in. And on the day, the place was so, rehab place was so concerned about this lawyer and what my mom was doing and what this lawyer was calling and asking them to have my mom sign, which you would think he would call and talk to my mom, not them. They
Mhm.
decided they wanted to have a psych exam scheduled for my mother. They couldn't believe any doctor would sign a piece of paper like that. And that morning when the psych practitioner came in, 2 and then 3 of my sisters were there, refused, told them to call my mother's lawyer, and then they drove my mom off the premises. Before that, my mom had to sign a form saying she was leaving against medical advice and all that can happen with
Mhm.
that. So she left without medicine. No one called us. We were supposed to have a meeting that afternoon at the rehab facility with all the family and the lawyers. No one called us. And we got an email saying, mom's resting at home. And that was it. The ombudsman, I believe, stopped the facility from filing mandatory complaints because if you're a caseworker, the social worker, anyone there working as a CNA, any of that type, nursing, RN, LPN, you're supposed to file a complaint with the Adult Protective Services. I later found out a year later, no one had filed a complaint, not one person. So that's why 2 family members did it. And from then on, it's been retribution,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
in open court, the doctor stated the names, which are confidential. You're not allowed to do that. Stated the names of who filed the complaint. And then retribution was inflicted on us for not saying we were the ones filing the complaint, monetary retribution. So it's just been, Arizona is a mess. It has not improved. It looks like they're trying. Sherry Lund and others associated with her are trying to do, a yeoman's job and are doing it on trying to get some things passed. But I think the public still needs to know these agencies that have the fancy websites when they do their updates,
Mhm.
they don't pull records, as we found in Adult Protective Services. They did not pull my mother's records. They did not pull anything. They did not interview. They didn't want to interview my uncle. They didn't want to interview, and I kept asking. I kept in contact, left them alone, and
Mhm.
then we keep in contact and say, have you done this yet? Have you done this? The investigator told me that it would take 8 hours to read what we had written down, and she had 45 other cases. So what they did do is go to the house and check and see if my mother was bruised and if my mother was sitting in her own urine and feces. That's the extent of it. They put down there that they talked to the 2 doctors, and they did not. They only talked to one, supposedly, who then on the stand said it didn't sound like anything he would have said, what was written in APS. And the second one, they never talked to him. They talked to his office staff. So to me, that's not talking to, and then they wrote that they spoke to both doctors. So it's just been a big mess. The AG's office was no help. They told me to get a lawyer. And I said, why should I get a lawyer for charges? Why does a private attorney need to be involved when it's the charging agency? Then they told me to call the DOJ, Department of Justice. Well, that didn't get anywhere. So I've been trying to find an advocate. I did reach out before this. We did pay for attorneys before this that gave us their opinion and what to do, like file for a guardian ad litem, file for a master of accounting. And when I did ask the judicial officer about mediation, because when I worked in probate, it was mandatory mediation, expressly to try to lower the financial risk to the ward. And all she said is, well, you can try that, but it's expensive and I'm not going to send it to mediation. From looking at the guidelines and everything for the Maricopa County Superior Court probate, the judicial officers have access if something doesn't look right to start a probate court investigation. None of that was done. None. So my mother is out $160,000. He sold her last property. And now after the statute of limitations for felonies has gone away, essentially that same day, she was placed into a care home. And that's how it ended up. And I believe everyone going into either of those courts, family court, which I'd had experience in also, and probate court, do not know how it is. It does not look like what it's on SUV, Law and Order,
right?
Or even looking at a criminal case where things really are tapped down hard and there can be sanctions on things. Probate court is a loose cannon. There is no oversight. I thought, at least since the commissioner took the contested case, that she might have a mentor or someone watching over. Clearly, there isn't any flagging in the system. There isn't any sort of software, despite what they said, for cases like my mother's and others. And it just drags on. The industry is a racket. It is a huge industry, not just involving judicial officers and attorneys who, I hate to use this word, stroke each other for the bar recommends, etc. And also you have judicial officers and fiduciaries and attorneys. It's a close network and they go to parties together, associate, things like that.
Yep.
If you're just doing a trust, you don't tend to do that. That's the ones that go to court. And there's also the industry of the outflow, selling homes cheaply, having attorneys associated with those that judicial officers might like to use. There's industry of antiques and jewelry. And I had times when I worked with clients who were deemed incapacitated, who did not sound incapacitated to me, but crying on the phone, asking why they had to move out of their house, why they had to, that it was paid for, why all their things were being sold. It's very sad. It's very sad. And Arizonans deserve better. And you need to know that the agencies that you think are going to be the safety net are not there. They're just not there. They have a fancy websites where they tell you the signs of abuse and they'll investigate it, and it doesn't happen. And when you call, you can't talk to anyone. But the attorneys are able to talk to people and are given telephone numbers. So I had to go through that last year to ask, why am I looking at confidential adult protective service documents, not even used the way they're supposed to be using, that were given to the alleged perpetrator less than a month into the investigation? Now, if I had a family even stranger than it was, I would have checked underneath my car for EIDs or something like that. It's risky, and no one told us that they did that. And the only answer I got finally from, since I used to work for the state of Arizona, I know how the email works. I just kept going up higher and higher and higher until I got to the head of things. When I finally got to the actual AG and put him included in there, that's when I got some action. And only then I had last October, so it was a year and a half ago, I had the AG for the Adult Protective Services DES department call me and tell me, well, it doesn't say specifically in the law that they can't give a perpetrator documents before an investigation is concluded. So essentially, I said, yes, I know what you're saying is a defective law. Unless it's spelled out, they can do whatever they want. So you really aren't protected, and people that do file complaints, I don't want to dissuade them from filing complaints. They need to file complaints.
Mhm.
You need to be ready that those complaints, lawyers that are predatory, that
Mhm.
know that someone doesn't have a family to help, or they'll find a crack in the family and exploit that crack.
Mm.
So trust, I hear it all the time on the news. I mean, on advertisements, they're rock solid. You don't want your case to end up in probate. That's not the truth. They're not rock solid. They can be manipulated. You find the right attorney and the right people, there isn't a problem manipulating a trust and having a vulnerable adult sign things.
Oh, this
So
is terrible.
that's pretty much this story.
Oh my goodness. So your mother is at a care home still.
Yes,
Oh,
now she is. She's been there for 3 weeks. And her phone was cut off. Her phone, it's been hard, and I think about 17 months. We all live here. In 17 months, I didn't get to see her at all. I'm not talking about COVID,
mhm,
because after I was assaulted, my uncle and my brother and I assaulted coming out of my sister's house, I
mhm,
will never set foot back in there.
mhm.
Um, I I went to an attorney. We had about an hour. And I realized that if I'd gotten an order of protection, well, that meant that I couldn't call and talk to my mom,
Right.
nor could I see my mom in a public place. So the only times I've seen my mother are in public places. And it's probably in the 7 years for COVID, we did not ask. They did not tell us that when and where they were taking her out, so we would be able to come and speak with my mom. So she doesn't have any connection. That as soon as they took her out, she wasn't remembering all her children and grandchildren anyway. But as soon as they took her out, something happened to her. She got very, very ill.
Mhm, mhm. And again, it was probably because her medication wasn't given.
I'm thinking that's what it was.
Yeah. Well,
So and opinions I've gotten on that from professionals think the same thing.
yeah, I mean, even I can relate to that. I mean, this is just terrible. This is happening all over, and I just, there are no golden years. Where is
No, there aren't. And as long as it's for profit, I mean, I remember a description of a fiduciary who is now retired when I worked,
Mhm.
that she throws parties and she's dripping with gold from the money of those that she's, and it makes me very sad. These people have worked their lives,
Mhm.
what they own, their modest estates. It doesn't matter whether you have a million or $1. Um, they're planning on trying to leave things to their children, and it's all depleted. a lot of it usually within the first year. In this case, my sister sold off all the properties before she even contacted a CPA about capital gains. She sold off 3 properties in 1 year, didn't use the IRS rule to try to use that money within 45 days. If you sell a property, you have to purchase another one, which she could have purchased another one and started renting that, because 2 of them were not rentable. One was, but she sold my mother's house she lived in, which would have been rentable, to put $10,000 or $30,000, which my mother could afford to fix it up. But sold all 3 of those in the space of 5 months. And my mother had a huge capital gains tax that she had to pay.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it's not for the benefit of her. And this filing in probate court, because my mom had a trust that had not changed in 10 years before she had the medical event. It was done in 2006, naming my brother as medical power of attorney and my brother as co-trustee. And they just conned their way right out of that. And they had an attorney tell them how to do the steps. And the attorney admitted, I'm sorry.
Oh, so a person can have a trust set up as their will, and they can get in there and override everything in that trust.
Yes.
Okay.
You have the right mindset of a family member or a third party member, and the right mindset of an attorney who doesn't really care and just wants to make money. This he spoke to the family. Well, he didn't speak to me. He didn't speak to my brother's attorney. He violated his ethical oath right there. He slithered away and never said one other word to my brother's attorney. So they hid these documents for 3.5 months, and we didn't find out about them. That my mother had changed this and that, had put my sisters in, 3 of the sisters in charge, where they weren't before.
Right. Oh,
So
Jim.
it can happen. There are a lot of predatory attorneys out there that
Oh,
will do
yes.
this.
Yeah,
And
they're everywhere.
I've tried to make complaints where I can make complaints about APS records and those things like that. So I'm not finished yet, but this is just where we are in the case. I'm still speaking at fiduciary boards. I've spoke at 2 meetings. The head judge of probate in Maricopa County is a member of the fiduciary board. So I think he's rotating out at a very convenient time while the Arizona House and Senate are trying to get probate reform passed. So I'm going to, I believe in 1 week, the fiduciary board is meeting, and I'm going to speak again at that one. And this one, I was directly going to talk to the judge in this meeting, and I'm going to still, even though he's rotating out. This is a mess.
Yeah.
It didn't get any better after 2010, 2011, and it's still the same. In fact, one of the fiduciaries in 2010 and 11 that was exposed and sued and disillusioned, before it was even disillusioned, the husband and wife that ran it, the wife started up a brand new business. And my sister's attorney actually had used her as part of his filing as a quote expert witness.
Oh my God.
And I thought, good grief, this person did all this stuff 10 years ago, and she set up shop while it was still going on and set herself up with a new company.
Oh my God.
So
this must be a
bad.
playbook, because what you have described, I've had other people on talking about this as well. And it's the same story, different scenario.
Yep. It's horribly sad, and there is a lot of outrage about it. I think the industry with their lawyer lobby and this little side things going on is the problem, because I don't understand. You have all these agencies tasked to protect vulnerable adults and the elderly. And what are they doing? They don't do what they say on their website. They don't investigate for financial exploitation. In fact, the investigator we had didn't even have a social work degree. Then they promoted her to financial exploitation advisor after she did the non-investigation on my mother.
Mm.
And said she never told me those things. She told me what she did about having 45 other cases. I know they're overloaded. But you want somebody in there to investigate financial exploitation, which their job description has, that Arizona puts up on the state, that you have to have a bachelor's degree in accounting. And she didn't do any of that investigation on my mom. She didn't pull anything. I totally believe, due to the interference of the trustee's attorney, who was acting more like a pseudo defense attorney and going on the tack,
Mhm.
instead of advising my sister to be transparent and everything else. And he was the attorney early on when everything started happening.
Mhm.
So he's been in it. How much of it he's tried to cover up his involvement in things, I don't know. But my mother suffers for it. She doesn't know, but she suffered the loss of her best friend, who
Mhm.
she never got to talk to again, who died 2 years ago from COVID. She hadn't spoken to him since I went into the house before I was assaulted, and I refused to go back in. And she's lost a lot of her friends in the old neighborhood she lived in, and the new neighborhood, and extended family members, and like I said, my grandchildren, another sibling's children. And Arizona has laws to protect that,
Mhm.
that you're not supposed to be isolating someone against people that they regularly have contacted unless they're deemed to be a danger, which we're not. I'm my mother's oldest, and I lived with her. So
Mhm.
when this happened.
Oh my goodness.
And another sibling my mother did stuff with all the time, going on trips, and had just come back from an overseas trip right before she had the event. And
Oh.
it rips families apart, and this very attorney has a blog that he writes on there, how important it is to maintain the family and make sure it's not ripped apart when something happens.
Uh-huh.
But if you don't think your trust, your beneficiary end, is being managed correctly, he's the attorney for you. So this is what everything he's done, not including all the threatening letters and things that he sent us. But so it's punitive, and it's still punitive, but I'm going to try to do what I can do.
What advice can you offer people when they go to set up a will? No, obviously not to sign into like a trust, not to put anything into a trust.
Well, one of my siblings, there's 3 of us, she's going to try to work on a law that's not going to allow what happened. Apparently, you have to spell it out completely. Um, I I would say, if you're going and getting the trust that they tell you is so rock solid, and you're spending $6,000 on a simple trust, getting it filled out so you don't end up in probate, and you have all your properties, and you basically do it yourself, and then the attorney rakes in the money for it. But I would say to put in things in your trust that say that someone can't come in violating your trust, declare you, quote, competent, and let you sign paperwork when it's clearly violating what the trust said. My mother had down that there were supposed to be 2 doctors. It was my brother's attorney was spot on in all of it, and saying, you can't do this. She has to have two doctors, and has to go through these procedures. And the other attorney just slithered off like a snake. And apparently when he testified, well, I was there, he testified, oh yeah, she's competent. So apparently with attorneys, they're more competent than neurologists. And on the same day, what a neurologist said on the same day, the fact that he said she was competent to make the changes, that trumped the doctor.
Well, this,
That trumped the reports.
this happens again in family court. An attorney will
Right,
call a parent mentally ill. That's the silver bullet.
right, right. I had a lot of those pleadings, unfortunately, with
Um,
garbage written in them because my ex-husband's attorney just wanted to get more money. So
mhm,
he agitated and agitated and
mhm.
agitated, said things that were untrue. And that's why I went to paralegal school after that.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
shocked that, of course, that a court functions like that, that
Yeah.
they don't sanction attorneys who make outrageous charges in the pleadings and they get away with, well, your client told me that. And that's their thing. And they can't be arrested for perjury in court, attorneys. So they get off.
But
They
isn't
know
there, is
pretty
there
much.
statutes of limitation on that? Or
Um,
no? There should be, right? Because it's a
well,
crime.
there was a statute of limitations on any sort of felony that a sibling might have committed. And the same time that went away, that was 7 years, and that would have been taking my mother, kidnapping, taking a vulnerable adult. It's called reckless endangerment, and it's a higher felony than if it was a regular adult. It's up there with a child, vulnerable adult. If you take them out, I believe it's class 5 and class 3. My mother had no way to comprehend leaving there without her medicine. She didn't even know what was wrong with her. She was barely walking, had to be monitored for blood pressure dosage and by someone who knew what they were doing, to be able to give her the different medicines. And she was also in a place that was specialized in geriatrics. So those people were trained and they knew what to look for. And my mom had another 2.5 weeks to live in there before Medicare said
Mhm.
no. And the place she was living in said that Medicare gave her a last date, which was 2.5 weeks before they pulled her out. And they only pulled her out because of the psych exam,
Mm.
and which would have ruined their other doctor's note. And she was supposed to go to 24/7 care. And that was
Mhm.
the plan. They said not assisted living. I mean, she
Mhm.
wasn't capable of assisted living. She needed 24/7 monitoring and all that. So she would have gone down to a lower skilled nursing center that offered 3 hours of therapy, physical therapy a day, and speech therapy, unlike the other one, which was, I think, 4.5, something like that. So, but they gave pamphlets to my brother and the sibling that was the other co-trustee was essentially running interference for the other two for their plan to work and wasn't telling my brother anything. He did not know. And the attorneys allowed them to act as if they were still co-trustees, which my sister knew all these documents had been drawn up because she was named in them.
Mm.
Didn't tell my brother. And she was still acting like she was co-trustee.
Oh,
And my
wow.
brother was trying to get her to act for the benefit of my mom. And he was trying not to get her ousted as a trustee because who would think your family would be like that?
Right.
But there are predatory attorneys that take advantage of that, who don't tell their client to be transparent, which is part of the guide for trustees. Be transparent with beneficiaries. And with health stuff, we're told it's HIPAA law, which isn't true.
Mhm.
Um, my, the trustee is not an quote agent like a hospital or a physician's office. We're told nothing about my mom's health. We didn't find out all these things we suspected and that we knew from the place she was in until the judge gave us ordered them to disclose the medical records last year, which they were dragging their feet on, and it went on and on and on. It was going on still for 4 months, and I was trying to. It just is a mess, and ask for, and the judge commissioner, excuse me, newly appointed commissioner, did not seem to remember what she had ordered in previous hearings,
Right.
and that you have a problem there.
Well, maybe she should have put it in writing the first time.
Right. So it
Oh
is a
my
big
God.
mess. I would like people to know this is what happens and can happen. And if your family, say your family doesn't have a trust and your loved one lives in another state, or they live here and you live in another state, you can still be conservator and guardian in Arizona, even if you live in Virginia. Do not let the court appoint one of these for-profit fiduciaries. They'll have
Yeah.
control over your loved ones' medical decisions. The family may not want certain things done, but they'll have control over that. They have control over their life. If you're deemed an incapacitated person, you're guilty going into the court. Where at least if you're a criminal accused of a crime, you're presumed to be innocent. When you are, someone says this person is, I suspect, a vulnerable adult, right then it starts ticking and money comes out of your pocket if you have any. They have immediate access
Wow.
to
I
start
am.
taking stuff out.
This is terrible.
It's awful, and
Yeah.
people need to know this is what happens. Do not, you can be guardian conservator, get your parents' bills if you live in another state, fill out a guardian conservator report. It's only due once a year in Arizona. You have to make a one-time visit at least to come. You would think most people would, to come see their parent or
Right.
whoever it may be. But be aware, this is what happens when you go into court. Like I said, there needs to be crime scene tape, or there needs to be a warning all over it. That if you respond to what you think is debauchery and has been illegal, you're going to be taken down a trial track. It's going to cost you money, and there's no one to stop it.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really, if you have a trust, I would just have extra things put in that and you can boutique it yourself with the attorney that you have that's filling out the trust paperwork. I mean,
Mhm.
my mom thought everything was covered. She needed 2 doctors for this. And most vulnerable adults do not make it. I'm talking about the elderly, do not make it out of probate alive. So I think that's why they get away with a lot of what they get away with.
No, I agree with
Because
you there.
yes, yes.
And
I
I
don't
like,
believe they do it to the vulnerable adults that are not elderly.
oh, I think they are.
Are they too?
I've heard.
Ugh.
I've heard horror stories. Um, but we've got to talk about this stuff and make people aware.
Right.
But
Exactly.
I'd like to have you back on again for like an
Well,
update if
thank you.
anything happens.
Thank you.
Uh
Absolutely, because I'm planning a lot.
huh. Uh huh.
I've
Now,
just been waiting for the dates to tick by, and I
I
thought I was
know.
going to start doing things in August because he'd already passed by, the attorney for the trustee had passed by the dates of appeal and the dates for filing things, which our attorney pointed out in his response.
Hmm. Hmm.
But this commissioner, who was already rotated out to criminal by then, who oversaw the trial, she didn't seem to care that he said, "Oh, you forgot you were going to award me attorney's fees that they have to pay." And right now, I'm recovering from a broken back. I'm not working. I'm not getting any kind of income. So
Hmm.
to have a judgment then placed on you, and the same commissioner signed a paper saying I didn't have to pay the filing fee because I broke my back the night before the hearing and I wasn't in the hospital. I was making sure I was going to the hearing and speaking, plus already had done the filing. So they couldn't get away with the 15-minute contested thing, which who knows if we'd even be allowed to speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think the more people that are aware, it's sad they've been able to hide it for so long.
Yeah.
The more people that are aware and we all get together, the bigger voice we're going to be. And they
Definitely.
won't have a choice anymore.
Right.
They'll
How,
have to reform it.
how can people reach you if they have any questions.
Well, I put myself on Facebook again. So my Facebook name is Laurie Bateman. And it's Laurie Bateman. And I have for senior abuse, I have an email set up, and I'm sorry I had to click on it. It's Stop Senior Abuse, and that's with a capital S. Stop Senior Abuse at protonmail.com. And excuse me, it's at proton.me.
So it's Proton, is it protonmail.me?
They don't use mail anymore. It's at proton, proton.me.
Okay, so it's Stop Senior Abuse at proton.me.
Yes.
Okay, I'll put that in the podcast notes.
And my name is Laurie, Laurie Bateman, Bateman. I've got my Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook for 7 years. So I have it back. And what my Facebook is going to be for is for stories of abuse and resources and just voices for people to put down and to share.
Definitely. Well, I thank you for coming on, but don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Mary Ann Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Laurie Bateman in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Laurie, for speaking out. Thank you.
Thank you.